the PRORES RAW support for the Panasonic Lumix S1H has finally arrived. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick guide to help you get started shooting PRORES RAW on your Panasonic Lumix S1H. I'm going to talk about what the PRORES RAW output actually is, clear some of the misconception about the PRORES RAW, and also share with you a few things that you may not know about the PRORES RAW support for the Panasonic Lumix S1H. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here. Welcome back to the channel. The PRORES RAW output for the Panasonic Lumix S1H has finally arrived. Today I'm making another video that talk about the PRORES RAW output for the S1H. So the first thing I want to talk about is what do you need to get you can start shooting the PRORES RAW format with your S1H. So obviously you will need the Panasonic Lumix S1H, you would need the Atomos Ninja V, which is the monitor and also recorder. Also make sure your SSD is fast enough, because when you're recording the 5.9K PRORES RAW HQ footage, you will need at least 400 MB per second write speed. And another thing that is also very important that you may not really notice is you need a good HDMI cable, because I remember about 2 months ago when I first got the beta firmware that has the PRORES RAW output. When I first tried it, I couldn't see anything on the Ninja V, and that was just because the HDMI cable and all the HDMI cable I have at home is not good enough. So you will need a high-speed HDMI cable if you want to have PRORES RAW output. So I remember I actually went and bought a high-speed HDMI cable, and the first one I bought, I can see the image finally on the screen, but it would cut out every few seconds because obviously that was not really high speed enough. So yeah, very important thing, go get a high-speed HDMI cable if you haven't got it yet. So next thing is to download the firmware for the S1H. Go to Panasonic's website, I put a link in the video description box below. Download the file, extract the zip file, and then there's the .bin file. You copy it to the SD card, and then you insert the SD card into your camera. Make sure your camera battery is fully charged, or at least almost fully charged. Turn on the camera and then go to the setup screen and go to the firmware version, I think it's called, and then go into it, and then you should be able to see there's an upgrade firmware button there that you can press. It will take about a minute or so, so make sure you don't switch off the camera, don't pull the battery or anything while it's updating. So after that, then your firmware should be updated to version 2.1, or maybe later if you watch this video later. And the next thing is to update the firmware for the Atomos Ninja V. Pretty much the same thing, go to Atomos website and download the latest firmware. The firmware should be 10.52 or later. I put a link to their website where you can download the firmware, and also in the description box below. So yeah, extract the zip file, copy the firmware file onto the SSD drive, and then plug into your Ninja V. And with the Ninja V, you just need to turn on the Ninja V, and it will automatically start updating the firmware to the latest one. And after that, what you need to do is go to the option and then change the quality to PRORES RAW or PRORES RAW HQ. And while you do that, you need to go to their website and get a code to unlock that feature. It should be free, so yeah, just go to the website for the instructions. And after that, then you should be able to record PRORES RAW on your Ninja V. And then the last thing you need to do is go back to the S1H, turn it on, and then go to the option screen, and then you can enable the RAW output And then you can select one of the raw video output format. From the highest quality is the 5.9K down to 4K or the 3.5K anamorphic output. So that's pretty much all you need to start shooting RAW with your S1H and the Atomos Ninja V. Oh, there's one last thing. To record the PRORES RAW footage, you don't actually press the record button on the S1H, and instead you press the record icon on the Ninja V, and that's how you can record the PRORES RAW video footage. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about what the PRORES RAW actually is. So PRORES RAW is one of the raw video format that is available right now. There are other kind of raw video format, for example the Cinema DNG or the Blackmagic RAW, but PRORES RAW is probably the most popular raw video format right now because Panasonic use it, and also Sony, Canon and Nikon, they all using the PRORES RAW format. So yeah, it is probably the most popular raw video format out there right now. And what the PRORES RAW format does is it records the Bayer output from the sensor instead of convert it to the RGB format, which most of the photo or the video file format that we use would record in the RGB. So it pretty much records what the sensor output is with very minimal processing. There's no noise reduction, there's no distortion correction, no chromatic aberration correction. So the lens profile correction is not applied when you record video in the raw output, and also the video is recorded in 12-bit with very minimal compression. And what that means is the PRORES RAW output from your S1H is the most unprocessed and also the highest quality video that you can record with your camera. But on the other hand, because the PRORES RAW output is pretty much unprocessed, so you would need to do a lot more work during the post-processing. For example, you may need to apply the distortion control yourself, and you definitely need to spend more time doing the noise reduction, especially when you are shooting under low light condition. If you put the raw output with a non-raw output side by side, you definitely can see the raw output has a lot more noise because the camera has not applied any in-camera noise reduction. So you have to do it yourself during the post-processing. And the size of the PRORES RAW file it really depends on what sort of contents that you are shooting. If you are shooting, for example, a blank wall, then the file size will be smaller. But if you are shooting something with a lot of details, a lot of things are moving, then the file size would be quite a bit bigger. When I look at the 5.9K PRORES RAW HQ file format that I capture using the S1H, I think typically 1 minute of footage is around 25 GB or so. Compared it with the 5.9K 10-bit output from the S1H, those files are around 1.3 GB or so. So the size of the 5.9K PRORES RAW HQ file is around 20 times bigger than the 10-bit output, and that means if you have a 1TB SSD hard drive for your Ninja V, you can only capture about 40 minutes of the PRORES RAW HQ 5.9K output. So yeah, definitely I also recommend you get a slightly larger SSD drive. If you only have a 500GB SSD drive on your Ninja V, it may not be quite enough if you want to shoot in 5.9K PRORES RAW HQ format. And with the S1H, there are a couple of different resolutions that you can output in the PRORES RAW. The highest resolution is 5.9K, and then you can record the 4K, and then down to 3.5K anamorphic. Unfortunately, it doesn't support the high-speed Full HD output when you enable the PRORES output. Because of the larger file size and the raw file format, processing the PRORES RAW file does require more processing power. However, the PRORES RAW format is a pretty efficient codec, so if your computer can handle processing the normal, for example, the 4K footage pretty smoothly, processing the PRORES RAW 4K should only be a little bit more intensive compared to the normal 4K footage. So yeah, you may drop a little bit of frame rate when you're trying to process it on the computer, but yeah, if your computer was able to handle the normal footage pretty smoothly, then it should still be okay to process the PRORES RAW files. Okay, next let's try to clear some of the misconception about the PRORES RAW and talk about things that the PRORES RAW actually can't do. If you are someone who has been mostly shooting photos in the past, a bit like me, you would be surprised to find that the PRORES RAW format actually you're not able to just freely adjust the white balance or the ISO during the post-processing as if you can do with your photo RAW file, or at least with the current PRORES RAW output that is captured by the S1H. The white balance and the ISO is baked into the file, so you cannot just freely change it in the post-processing. You can push or pull the exposure a bit, and of course you can also adjust the color tint a bit, but it's not quite the same as a photo file or some other raw video format that you can just adjust freely during post-processing. At least not now. In the future that may change, but not with the current version we have right now. And if you don't really have the time or the resources or the knowledge on how to process the PRORES RAW files, you probably better off just shoot in the 8-bit or the 10-bit file format using your S1H, because those file formats has already been processed by the camera. So with minimal processing or even no processing, those files already look very nice. But with the PRORES RAW file, you definitely have to do quite a bit of processing to make those files look good. In terms of the display lag when you are shooting in the PRORES RAW output, I actually don't really notice there's much difference when you are shooting in the RAW output or not. If you compare the PRORES RAW output to the 8-bit video file captured by the S1H, the PRORES RAW output definitely capture much wider dynamic range. But if you compare it with the 10-bit VLOG output from the S1H, then the PRORES RAW actually capture pretty much identical dynamic range compared to the 10-bit VLOG footage. And there are a few other things that I want to share with you guys about the PRORES RAW output with the S1H. First is, there is no time limit when you are recording in PRORES RAW. Doesn't matter whether you are recording in 5.9K or the 4K 60 or any of the format, you can record as long as you want. So as long as you have the battery and the storage space, you can record as long as possible. I have recorded some pretty long 5.9K raw footage with the S1H, and I never have any overheating problem at all. For some reason, the auto white balance feature is disabled when you are shooting in the PRORES RAW output. So you have to manually select your white balance when you are shooting in PRORES RAW format. And as I mentioned before, the white balance, you cannot like freely adjust it during the post-processing. So make sure you select the white balance as close as possible when you are shooting in PRORES RAW output. And when you are shooting 5.9K raw video, the Ninja V cannot output using the HDMI-OUT to another HDMI device. But if you are shooting in 4K RAW or 3.5K RAW, then the HDMI output port on the Ninja V can still work and output the video to another HDMI device. Panasonic has also released a lot which allow you to convert the gamut from the S1H RAW file to V-GAMUT. So that is for users who are more getting used to doing the color grading with the VLOG or the V-GAMUT. And then you can apply the V709 LUT or the other LUTs that is available from Panasonic's VariCam library. And unlike the Nikon Z6, which when you are shooting in the PRORES RAW format, the EVF cannot be used, with the S1H, when you're shooting in PRORES RAW, it doesn't matter if you want to use the LCD or the EVF, they are both functional. And not only that, you can still apply the different kind of visual assist tools on top. For example, waveform, vector scope, zebra pattern, or the HDMI timecode. They are all available even when you're shooting in the PRORES RAW format. In theory, this is the highest quality output from the S1H. It gives you a lot more data that you can use to generate your video. But you do need to spend quite a lot more effort. You need to spend more time to do the post-processing. You have to do a lot of things yourself instead of relying on the camera to do it for you. For example, the noise reduction. So the post-processing time is definitely a lot longer compared to the 8-bit or even the 10-bit vlog footage. So while it's definitely great to see the S1H now has the PRORES RAW output, I don't think it's a format that is suitable for everyone and definitely not suitable for every kind of usage. If you're shooting some big budget production and you have a lot of resources or time, or you have some experts to help you to do the post-processing and editing, then I would highly recommend you to shoot in the PRORES RAW format, because that's the format that can give you the best quality from your S1H. But if you just want to capture some casual daily footage, for example, if you go out with your kids and play in the playground, or if you are just shooting some daily vlogging footage, then the PRORES RAW format is probably not the best choice for this kind of videos.